are trying to put it in.
You have to remember, you have certain distributions that are being used as a standard, as a normal system in a business. Like usually it would be things like SUSE or Red Hat. And what happens is the NSA, as far as I know, they only work on 4 systems, and that's Mac OS X, Windows, and they work on Red Hat and SUSE. So all these systems you have to assume before they go into binary form, they do get some kind of treatment from the NSA. And there are all kinds of rumors both ways saying, well, it's just nothing too hairy going on here. And some people will say, well, they put binary things inside. They cannot even show us the source code they put inside, so that kind of looks suspicious. In China, what they do now in China is they look to have some access to source code, and as far as I know, from 2009, they made a binary distributions for Internet Cafe that's based on Linux, but already had inside it some kind of surveillance. And the coffee shops would have to use this so-called Linux thing, but only in binary form, so it was handed to them by the government.
On that was Red Flag Linux, and what I'd heard as well, it might have been wrong, but what I'd heard was the excuse for that was to prevent, it was to help Microsoft, allegedly, because all these internet cafes were at that time running illegal versions of Windows. And they said, well, we use to help Microsoft, since Microsoft are so determined, allegedly, to wipe out illegal installs of Windows. They said, right, okay, we'll put Red Flag on it. And apparently it wasn't free either. It was something that was mandated. The internet cafes had to do it, but they didn't get it free. They had to pay for it.
If I could just add something very quickly, there was 2 points I wanted to make. Firstly, unless I'm greatly misinterpreting my terms and conditions for my service provider, which is O2, by the way, when I joined, I've signed away my rights to privacy because I've allowed them to inspect my packets as far as the terms and conditions are stated. It could be me misinterpreting it, but what I can see happening, and the sort of point that was missed, was when we have all this rumour about code being put into an operating system or the potential. If an agency was suitably interested in a user at home, they could quite easily get a court order and hit the ISP themselves and monitor it from the ISP, and wouldn't need any code on the individual platform or the individual user's machine. And I think that if we were to enter a new world of sort of more intrusive monitoring of internet connections, it would be more of a case of a term and condition via your ISP that you sign up to digitally when you subscribe to whichever ISP you use, which would make it a condition of entry like a football ground or a nightclub. And I think that's the way they'll go. I don't believe at the moment, I mean, I can't speak for any country other than the UK, but I don't believe there's anything sort of covert either in the pipeline or being facilitated at the moment.
Oh, there is actually. I can correct you. The first thing we have is this thing called Form, and Form is just one company doing a deep packet inspection. And I know quite a few people work against that in UK. And what
but
they
Form was for advertising, wasn't it?
Well, that's what they say. There is the public explanation, and there is something that goes a bit deeper. But one thing that happens in the UK now is they store people's emails, and they use the terrorism as a reason. You don't have to be on a list for them to keep all your emails in storage somewhere. And the same thing goes for your phone calls, and the same thing goes for your location. So I have a friend who works in O2. And while I was in the gym, he explained to me that they have instructions they have to keep people's locations of, their phones and everything else. Basically give you a very precise location of the person each moment. And you don't have to be a specialist to do that. It's just very cheap for them to get some storage from a company like EMC and just dump it somewhere. And if the government, that's what it's for. It's basically for authorities when they want to get a person's location after he's done something. But the other thing is with Form, you have to remember how the service came about. It's people who work for BP, and more interestingly, the government refused to do anything about it, even though I think they broke some laws or privacy guidelines of some sort. And the European Commission had to basically kind of bitch slap the British government to tell them, well, this is a violation. It's quite a funny thing with the European Commission, which is kind of over the sea, is giving instruction or trying to reprimand the British government over practices which are obviously quite serious. And as far as I know, there is no deep packet inspection in Europe just yet. It's more of a British thing now. And for those who don't know, what this involves is them going into your packets, your visited pages, but not just the visited pages. It's not your page history. They actually get your packets, so they get your emails, they get your correspondence, they get your IRC conversations and everything else, unless it's encrypted, and then they kind of get stuck. And what they do with that is they build a profile of you, and they sell the profile to an advertising company which might know if you're looking for some product of some sort. Perhaps your deficiencies, your physical disabilities, or something will give them some clue about who you are and what your problems are and what you're looking at and who you're talking to. Now the issue is this information, as far as I know, can go to the government as well, and they can use that to classify people or to assign to them a risk level or some sort of thing.
Because I've read the same type of theories and evidence has been cited on net about this, and a couple of things struck me about it. A lot of people say that all the ISPs are obliged to keep details of the users and what they're accessing, and there's all sorts of monitoring going on so that profiles can be built. But I would cite recently there was a case with the Ministry of Sound where they were looking to seek damages from file sharers, only to find that BT, in this case, had deleted a lot of the users' details from their system, and the Ministry of Sound weren't able to pursue a civil court case. Now, if BT and any other service provider was building up these profiles, they could have easily passed over the data. So that was the first. So in the second thing, form. I mean, we saw that the hoo-ha it caused, and I mean that was a directed advertising and marketing system. I just find it very difficult to grasp that with all this data, and obviously the millions and millions of users in the UK all doing different things at the same time, how on earth it would be collated, how on earth a profile would be made that would be of any sort of realistic proportions to anybody. For example, my computer here, I could access it now and I could surf for an hour or two, and then my wife could jump on the same machine and surf again. I don't believe we've got the resources to do that, and I don't believe that they can build up an effective profile on anybody with means like that. I think what they do, I think, is a case of directed surveillance. So if they had information that person X was doing whatever, then yes, they would focus their surveillance onto that person. But I don't think in the terms of a nationwide sort of monitoring campaign, I just can't see that being done at the moment.
You underestimate that's one of the strengths they have, is that they can try and distinguish between different sessions and cookies, so they can tell the difference between you and your wife while you're connected on the same IP address. And I was going to say something before. You mentioned BP deleting some data, but the issue there is that they want to get very rudimentary data on basically they see people's IP addresses and they see what the IP address is doing, and they don't really know if it's a person just latching onto the Wi-Fi. It can be a zombie PC, or it can be a person's neighbor using the connection. That's the issue. That's the way they deal with that, and they want to send you a threat of a lawsuit based on this information, which isn't really sufficient because they cannot really ensure it's you doing that type of stuff. And the same goes for like child porn. Sometimes people will plant on another person's computer. They will plant evidence to get this person in trouble, and it's always a very complicated thing, especially when you have zombie PCs and you have people using somebody else's Wi-Fi. But when it comes to trying to tell the difference between you and your wife, you have to remember you have lots of people working on a multi-billion-dollar business trying to tell the difference between sexes based on pages and based on clicking frequencies and all kinds of things. And now when you have separate profiles for different users, and that's something that didn't exist back when I was using Windows 95, everybody would basically use just about the same desktop. You had different options for that, but most people would just log in with the same cookies and the same browser session, and you didn't really have the notion of different profiles so much. But now you do have that. And I suppose if a person's wife uses the exact same browsing section with everything else is the same, it's kind of a tricky thing, because then you can access the person's email address and everything else. And they have ways of telling the difference.
Well, yeah, one of the things